Hello, and thanks for joining us today for the latest Technology Networks webinar, Chuck the Buffer Exchange Time Suck with Big Tuna. I'm Rory Mackenzie, a senior science writer for Technology Networks, and I'm here to moderate today's event. I'm really pleased to have Dr. Delray Jackson joining me today as your presenter. Delray has been working as a product manager for nearly a decade, helping several biopharma groups accelerate their drug discovery and development processes with lab automation. Since coming to Unchained Labs, Delray has been able to focus on delivering automated, high-throughput solutions for buffer exchange in biologics and gene therapy research and development. Following the webinar, we will have a Q&A session with Delray. We would welcome any questions that you may have for him. Please enter any of those questions you have into the box on the right-hand side of your screen and click send. And for any questions that we don't have time to get to, we will be sure you're contacted offline with an answer. And please remember, you can ask questions at any time, even while watching the webinar on demand. I'll now hand over to Delray to begin his presentation.
All right, let's find out how you can chuck the buffer exchange time suck with Big Tuna. In the morning, I need to wake up my 7-year-old daughter for school. I often work from home, so I have limited time to get that chore done. Now, this is the scene I would normally walk into. There would be crying and tears, and usually just from me. That is until I figured out you can program routines on your Alexa device. That means that now her humidifier and nightlight get shut off automatically. Her wake-up light comes on for her. Then her favorite Spotify playlist plays for 5 minutes, ending with a good morning, a weather update, and a reminder for her to get up and get ready for school. I didn't really make the connection at first, but unconsciously I was doing at home what I get to help customers do in my job every day: solve a chore with some easy to use automation. And the chore I'm talking about today that we're here tuned in for is that of buffer exchange. But it's a very critical chore, right? If you're working with LNPs, you need to get them out of methanol very quickly, so buffer exchanges have to happen fast. If you're working with AAVs, you often need to concentrate them because you can manufacture them, but they're dilute, and so you need to concentrate them down to your actual target value. For nucleic acids, it can be critical to desalt them before you run them for analysis or pass them off for a downstream application. With my personal favorite, proteins, antibodies, it's very critical for formulation selection and optimization, doing buffer exchange. And often it's high sample number or high target formulation, final buffer values, or a combination of both that you're dealing with in those formulation studies. And the tools available aren't great. Most of us are still doing buffer exchange manually. So we're using dialysis or concentration or TFF. Each do have some of their advantages, but also disadvantages, especially when you add in having to scale up your number of samples or number of target buffers. So dialysis can be quite slow, dilute your sample. With centrifugation, it is faster, but we can get membrane clogging and lose some of our sample recovery. With TFF, it can be complicated to set up, and you often need a large volume to make it effective. And when you're having to do formulation studies where it's very critical that you maximize the screening, the number that you can do so that you can get to manufacturing conditions earlier, that can be a chore to only have manual methods available. And in general, just doing sample prep is a time sink. So you might be using dialysis to do buffer exchange, transferring that now to filters because you might have to concentrate. And then that concentration value at the end might not be your ideal. You might overshoot or undershoot your target concentration, and this could lead to repeated steps and higher time. So what is the alternative? Is there a better way? Well, definitely, and that is Big Tuna. Big Tuna is an automated, high throughput buffer exchange and concentration platform. It's really a solution all in one. It's going to let you do up to 96 exchanges in parallel with the option to concentrate, as we'll see. You have a large volume range, as small as 100 microliters per sample, all the way up to 48 mils of sample work on Big Tuna. And getting it set up is quick. Often you can do that in under 30 minutes time. The high throughput part for Big Tuna comes from our unfilters. So this is Big Tuna uses a plate-based exchange using the unfilters. They come in two formats, a 96 and a 24, referring to the number of wells or samples that can go in each. Your volume range for the 96 is lower, between 100 and 450 microliters. And on the unfiltered 24, it takes off from that 450 microliter upper end of the 96 and brings you all the way up to 8 mils. They come in molecular weight cutoffs ranging between 3 and 100 kilodaltons, and they use a regenerated cellulose membrane material. I really like this slide because it shows you in one shot the unique advantage of the buffer exchange technology you'll get with Big Tuna. It is an automated pressure-based UF-DF solution. The UF refers to ultrafiltration, or the size range where we are filtering out, so the biomolecules that we are best suited for. And also the fact that we're using size exclusion to do the filtering. DF just refers to the fact that you can add buffer back in. And one of the key pieces of that technology is shown on the left side of the slide, the measuring volume. We're going to see exactly how we do that in a moment, but this is a critical step that we do at the beginning of every run and in every buffer exchange cycle. What that allows is for Big Tuna to constantly know the individual volume of every sample that's running on it, whether it's 96, 24, 1, or a combination in between. So with each cycle, buffer exchange cycle, even positive pressure is applied across all the samples. At the end of that, the measure volume comes in and finds out exactly how much is filtered through, which allows Big Tuna to add the exact amount of new buffer required. And since some wells may flow for various reasons at different rates, this is nice because now you can get your exact target buffer exchange value. And then at the end, with the option to concentrate, that is also dialed in. Another cool part is that while that buffer exchange is happening, Big Tuna uses gentle orbital mixing, which helps get around something you see with other methods, which is dead-end filtration. So because your biomolecules on Big Tuna are kept in solution with the orbital mixing, you're going to get higher sample recovery and faster exchanges as well. It's really nice. You can actually concentrate up to 100-fold on Big Tuna with a reduced sample volume application. What this allows is some of the extra locations on deck, the reservoirs, can now be used for sample. So it goes above and beyond that 8 mil volume range of the unfiltered 24, actually jumps it all the way up to 48 mils. And now you can concentrate ultimately down to about 500 microliters and achieve 100x concentration. Besides concentration, the other things that you can program are the percent removal per cycle. So Big Tuna is an automated solution, so you can actually type in or have use the preset values for these, and your final percent exchange. So tell me, when is the last time you've told your bucket of dialysis like that you wanted a 95% exchange? That's the sort of process control you'll have with Big Tuna. So that's the technology. Now let's look at the hardware, how it's implemented. Here you see a nice close-up view of the Big Tuna deck, and with some of the key parts labeled for us. On the left is the ultrasonic volume check. Here up front in this rectangular box is the buffer exchange chamber. On the left, that's where the unfilter sits. And you can see that we use all of the space on that. We have 2 reservoirs right on top, bringing the total number of reservoirs that are on deck to 8. The 6-tip arm that we'll see in a little bit is located here on the left. And the gripper on the right, it actually serves 2 purposes, one which we'll also see. One is to move the ultrasonic volume sense to each of your samples, but it also takes these tips you see on the right from the hotel and automatically moves them to your on-deck position, giving you that walk-away freedom. Okay, enough talking from me. Well, that's not true. I'm going to still talk, but now we can do it while we see Big Tuna in action. That gripper hand comes over at the beginning of every run, grabs the ultrasonic volume sensor tool, and also during every buffer exchange cycle, the same measurement happens for each of your samples. And it just gets an accurate read within 10% of the actual volume in every well on either unfiltered 96 or unfiltered 24. The buffer refill, that's the key part. This is what really frees you up so you're not stuck to a centrifuge or the bench having to make new additions. The buffer refill will happen automatically using liquid displaced air technology. You'll notice that the channels have a variable Y span. This is cool because it allows you to process both unfiltered 24s and 96s in the same buffer exchange chamber. There's no configuration that you have to do. The channels will just change to the correct raster or space position. So the hardware is very accessible, straightforward, as you can see. The software reflects that as well. You are not programming automation on Big Tuna. You're really just entering in information about your biomolecule, concentration, volumes, and then setting it up pretty quick and easily in the software. And it will guide every user in the lab so that everyone can take advantage of Big Tuna. Here are just the simple values that have to be set so you can get these nice results with Big Tuna. But you don't have to be a buffer exchange expert either. You can use the sample presets that come with it that are based upon sample type and concentration, but we don't take away any of the freedom or power to customize. If you have to tweak these values later, you can always change them as well. Once you get your run set up on Big Tuna, you'll know exactly where it's at. From an overall standpoint, how far the exchanges have proceeded, or how many concentration cycles you have left. And also you'll notice on the left here something that is nice. It's that every sample has its own progress report as well. So again, some things might flow faster than others, and finish before others. You can see a pause button in the upper right side of the screen that allows users to come in, and if they want to, it's optional, they can pause a run, remove samples that have finished exchanging already. And finally, coolest part, you get data on all of this. So whether you're running buffer exchanges and concentrations or just concentrations, you're going to have a cycle-by-cycle breakdown and a sample-by-sample breakdown of the key aspects of it. So the initial concentration, initial volume, and then the final concentration and final volume that's determined. All of that's going to be put in a nice buffer exchange context specific format. So that's the buffer exchange in a nutshell. But do we put the squeeze on you? Like, do you have to get the nice walk away and the reports and the process control at the expense of sample integrity or sample recovery? Well, let's walk through a few examples showing the results that you can expect with Big Tuna. So in this example, we have some monoclonal antibodies that are in a high salt buffer, and we want to run those, characterize them on an LCMS. In order to do that, we need to exchange them into methanol, and we have 450 different samples that we want to process. Here you can see that the results you'll get with Big Tuna are uniform and fast. All of these were prepped and done in less than 2.5 hours. And this is great because you're going to get consistent exchange results, which will eliminate variability. Also, you can run formulations. In this example, we have 4 different monoclonal antibodies, and let's say we want to screen them into 6 different excipients. So we have a larger volume, 8 mils. Here's an example of how you can program in the percent exchange removal. Here, it's set at 66 with a final percent exchange target of 96%. But showing you that you can really save time, we're also going to concentrate these samples in parallel, or actually right after we do the exchange, looking for a target of 5x concentration. So we talked about Big Tuna having an adaptive buffer exchange technology. This really nicely shows you how that benefits you. In this example, monoclonal antibody 3 ran faster, but because Big Tuna measures the flow rate every single cycle, it's able to compensate for that and adjust the overall filtration times that happen in the buffer exchange chamber so that we don't run out, or Big Tuna won't run out your fastest flowing samples, and to guarantee that every cycle is going to start at the same volume. And the results show that. So monoclonal antibody 3, if you let your eye travel to that row there, you can see that the target concentration value of 50 mg per mil is pretty consistent across all of the samples, even though one of them was running fast. This is nice because now you're going to have that accurate final concentration. You don't have to go back and rerun this to dial in the concentration value. With confidence, you can pass it down the line, downstream from you, to have it characterized. You can also work with nucleic acids on Big Tuna. In this example, we're doing high throughput desalting. So we have double-stranded DNA that we want to put into nuclease-free water. And here you'll see some of the values of Big Tuna in that we can do the buffer exchange and then this threefold concentration as well. Now let's look at the results in the 24 and the 96 unfilter. Here you can see that both of them give great percent exchange values, over 97% in both the unfiltered 96 and the unfiltered 24. Also, we were able to dial in and hit that 3x concentration value, giving us high recovery. Switching over to everybody's favorite non-viral vector, LNPs. Again, LNPs, after you manufacture them, you need to get them out of that organic solvent that they're made in, and you usually want to do this very quickly. So how can Big Tuna help us with that? Well, in this example, we're starting with LNPs that have ethanol, and we want to exchange them into PBS, also concentrate them 3x at the same time. We're going to run these on our unfiltered 24 with 100 kilodalton molecular weight cutoff. And lots of numbers on the screen here, but the thing that my eye is drawn to is the fact that we have a great percent exchange, very high. We were able to concentrate by about 3x and maintain sample and do this without any loss of encapsulation. So high sample recovery and high sample integrity. But the nice thing is the time. This was done in about 90 minutes. What else has to be concentrated? Well, monoclonal antibodies can also be made very dilute. Maybe you can manufacture them and then run them on different columns and collect all of these different fractions. But when you put them together, they can still be dilute. So Big Tuna can be used in this workflow. In this example, we wanted to concentrate by 100-fold our monoclonal antibodies. We're starting with 48 mils of sample. We're going to run these through the Unfilter 24 with a 10 kilodalton molecular weight cutoff. But what we're going to do is first run reduced sample volume and then the concentrate only applications. And you can see doing this that we get we get that over 100x concentration, and we have great recovery of almost 97% recovery in these examples. And what the data on the right shows you is that our approach of this automated positive pressure UFDF doesn't change the characteristics or the sample integrity while it does that. Something else that has to be concentrated often are AAVs. And here we're going to look at the same thing, running the reduced sample volume application followed by concentrate only. And let's look at these results with the AAV9. Here we got a 36-fold concentration in 1.5 hours, and without upsetting the capsid payload, we kept that intact. So with any of our different molecular weight cutoffs, working with different biomolecules, you're not going to get all the benefits of Big Tuna at the cost of your sample recovery or your sample integrity. And we can see that in the data over and over in the results that we get. So there's lots to benefit by reeling in Big Tuna. Fast exchanges and concentrations, have complete process control, and your time, both your setup time and your walk away time, you're going to get back. But it's not going to be at the expense of your recovery or quality as well. So all of these different biomolecules, you can buffer exchange, you can concentrate, you can do both if you want, which is great for all the different applications that are required, desalting and sample cleanup. So with Big Tuna automating your buffer exchange, you're going to gain back precious time and hopefully start your day off right, just like my daughter does now as well.
Thank you so much, Delray. I'm sure that all our listeners on today's webinar will agree there were some excellent points raised during his presentation, which means we can now proceed to the Q&A session. So to submit a question to Delray, you should enter that question into the box on the right-hand side of your screen and click send. We're going to get through as many questions as possible during the time we have available. Now, we've had several questions submitted already, so I'm going to move straight on to those. Initial question, Delray, how long do buffer exchanges take?
Yeah, thanks, Rory. That's a pretty common question. There's no one answer for it because it really depends upon how fast the filtrate is going through for each sample, which can be the factors that contribute to that can be sample concentration, buffer viscosity, even, and then temperature. So we do generally say, it's anywhere from, 1 to, I would say, about 6 hours though. But there is a varying range. The thing I like to remind people though, Rory, is that it almost doesn't matter how long it takes because you're now free to go off and do other stuff. So whether it's 1 hour or 2 hours, it almost doesn't matter because Big Tuna is going to take care of it for you.
Of course, great, thank you. Here's another good one that's coming. How does Big Tuna handle samples that run at different rates but in the same unfilter?
Yeah, it does it by modulating the amount of time that the pressure is applied in the buffer exchange chamber. And so it won't change, for instance, like the pressure amount, and that positive pressure is applied evenly to all of the samples that are in the unfilter. And so what it will do is make sure that to guarantee sample integrity and sample recovery, it will modulate the amount of time, and it modulates that to essentially the fastest flowing sample because that's the one that's at risk of running out. And so it will shorten the amount of time or extend it in the cases where nothing is running too fast. And so really it's the time that's the adaptive part of the buffer exchange cycle.
Great, thank you for clarifying, Terry. A good and important question we have here. Can we program to use part of the plate, for example, 6 wells instead of 24? And can the same plate be used again for unused positions?
Yes, absolutely. That's the best way to say it. So life doesn't come at us in 24 or 96 samples, of course. And so you can run, from 1 to 24 or from 1 to 96 of those samples. And the software has nice features to allow you to program that, directly with clicking into the unfiltered plate, and you can set the sample and the buffer that you want to exchange into there. Also, that can be imported in, and we refer to that as a partial unfilter. And you may run the unused wells of that unfilter in subsequent runs.
Great, thank you for clarifying. An important question here about the software side rather than the hardware side. Is the software 21 CFR compliant?
It is not. It doesn't have that marking, but it does have user management. So what we have seen is that some labs with that user management capability and taking advantage of the features that the operating system, Windows operating system, allows is between a combination of the two in their SOP or their operating procedures, they're able to check that compliance box. But natively, the software alone doesn't, but it does have features to contribute towards compliance.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, Dory. Can you control Big Tuna with an API? That's a good question that's coming.
Yeah, this is with a software background. This is in my wheelhouse. So yes, you may with an API. So that's the part of the software that sits, I would say, between Big Tuna's control software and the software that you might want to use in your lab. And examples that we've seen are customers will use the API to integrate Big Tuna directly into their ELN system or their LIMS systems, or if they have different lab automation software, they can also control Big Tuna that way. So yes, there is an API, and it has the features needed so you can remotely monitor, control, and intervene with Big Tuna.
Great, thank you so much. We're only going to have time for a few more questions in today's Q&A, but I just want to remind anyone that any questions that we don't have time to get to today will be answered offline as soon as possible. So even if you're listening to this webinar on demand, please do continue to ask questions and we will get you an answer. And just as a reminder, please, if you would like to submit a question before we finish your Q&A, please enter it into the box on the right-hand side of your screen and hit that send button. a question here, Delray. What changes happen with buffer exchange for different sample types?
I guess essentially it goes back to modulating the buffer exchange cycle time. So different sample types, nucleic acids, monoclonal antibodies, AAVs, or LNPs, the process is essentially the same. And those factors that do matter is, in addition to the buffer exchange cycle time, would be the pressure, the PSI, and then your target exchange value, which again is something you as a user of Big Tuna can program in. And that's pretty much it though. And so we have made it though so that Big Tuna software has sample presets. And because that's, as scientists, as users, we're maybe not experts on the tech that goes into buffer exchange, but we're experts on our sample types. And so we've made it so that for Big Tuna, you essentially say what your sample is and the relative concentration. And with that information and using that ultrasonic volume sensor, Rory, that's something I probably don't give enough credit to or enough focus on, but it's such a key part of how Big Tuna works. So whether your samples are, really concentrated proteins or maybe dilute AAVs, Big Tuna is always going to know how fast things are flowing out.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to have a check and see if any other questions have come in. Yes, we do have time for one. I think this might be our last question, but a question just, I think, on practicalities here. Say my starting concentration of a sample is 120 milligrams per mil. Could I add my samples and my diluent and have Big Tuna dilute my samples to the target concentration listed in the SOP?
Absolutely, yes. We didn't have time in today's discussion, but we do have an optional feature where it's referred to as dilute and filter. And so, yes, you can add, in addition to your buffer, your diluent, which could be your final buffer or your starting buffer. Big Tuna will use that and do an initial dilution and then run through your buffer exchange or your concentration cycle. And I often do say that concentration is optional, but in the case perhaps who the audience member who asked this might be getting at this, you don't have to do buffer exchange. So you could just use Big Tuna to do your dilution, I guess, which is in this case the opposite of a concentration, and or run just a concentration cycle only as well.
Great, thank you for that, Delray. Thanks for all your answers in today's Q&A and also for your fantastic presentation. And a big thank you to all our listeners and to our questioners who submitted their excellent questions. Just to remind everyone, a certificate of attendance is now available to download from the Handouts tab on the right-hand side of the webinar platform. And the webinar will now be made available on demand. So if you have any friends or colleagues that you think might be interested in listening to Delray's talk, please feel free to share the link. I'm going to wrap up now. I'd like to thank everyone again for their time today. Until next time, goodbye.